Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Music Rating, Ranking, and Reviewing podcast that we like to call Music Meltdown, in which we rate, rank, and review any artist's discography, songs, musical topics, really whatever comes to mind. This episode, we're going to be going into the late 90s, following into the 2000s, and put out sort of a comeback release in 2020. Bit of an emo, indie folk, sort of indie rock band talking about Bright Eyes, obviously led by Connor Oberst, and I I started this one as kind of a contrast to the earlier video that I did on Regina Spektor, because in a lot of ways, I think that you guys were a band that I feel like I should have liked more than I did, but ultimately I just simply wasn't as keen on as I thought that I should be. They operate from a very similar style that I like. I like that sort of emo style of songwriting that he comes from too. But for whatever reason, the records that I had heard beforehand just simply didn't resonate with me too strongly. I'd heard Wide Awake It's Morning, and I wasn't too overtly impressed by that. I'd heard This People's Key, and I thought that was a solid record, but for the most part, past that, I think I'd heard a couple of other tracks, but I was never like fully drawn into the world of Bright Eyes like I know that some people are. And while I would say now I am a bigger Bright Eyes fan than I was before doing this, they still really aren't anywhere near like my favorite artists. They're kind of in this realm of bands that I like a decent bit, but they're never going to be sort of one of my all-time favorites. One that I might respect more than I say that I generally enjoy. With that being said, I'm counting all of their core studio records except for the Christmas album, because who cares about Christmas albums? That being said, let's get into this with my least favorite Bright Eyes record. Actually coming by a bit of a surprise for me because I would have expected this one to be a little bit higher, as it was a Bright Eyes record that I was familiar with beforehand, and that's going to be The People's Key. Of the albums I knew before this, I just don't think that this one is quite that interesting. It feels a bit standard for the group. The songs are solid and the band is pretty good, but on the whole, there's not much feeling to a lot of these songs. They're toying with some early 2010s indie rock sounds. Reminds me a bit of something like Alt J, and it's very comparable to what, say, Death Cab for Cutie were doing around a similar time, with a relatively similar amount of success. It's a decent album, but they have far better for me. I am at 3 stars for The People's Key. Number 9 for me, I'm going with their record Fevers and Mirrors. This one was a bit of a drop off compared to the records beforehand. It's still good, still 3.5 stars. I believe this is one that I actually knew before this as well, but I do think that this one is rather inconsistent. The best tracks are excellent, however, Something Vague, The Movement of a Hand, Sunrise Sunset, and A Song to Pass the Time. It's a pretty good indie folk record outside of the interview section on an attempt to top the scale. It's just fairly good, just not quite as good as the two that directly preceded it for me. So that one's also going to be at 3.5 stars. They're going to be at 3.5 for a while for Bright Eyes. After them, we're probably talking about their most stylistic change, aside from, switching to country, not country, Christmas music for that one record. Going to be Digital Ash and a Digital Urn. This is surprising coming off of their critically acclaimed I'm Wide Awake It's Morning record. And despite releasing on the same day, it is very, very different. This record focuses far more on electronic and more experimental synth additions to their traditional indie rock sound. It's a really cool blending that does lead to some inconsistencies from the track listing, but I still think that it's really cool. The opener's all right, same with Down a Rabbit Hole and Theme to Pinatas. When the record is on point, it's some of the best material that the band ever put out. Uh, Goldmine Gutted, Take It Easy, Devil in the Details, and the closing number, Easy Lucky Free, are all great. It's another 3.5 star record. It's a good listen throughout it, but it does have some notable holes that put it a little bit lower for me. Going just up from there, this is probably a record that I like a decent bit more than other people. I have their debut, A Collection of Songs. It's a very interesting debut. It lays the groundwork for the emo lyrics matched with their indie folk and indie rock sensibilities. Has a bit of slacker rock qualities at points as well. Notably, this record sounds like shit. It's very raw, like we do to them not being anything at this point. It leans to a more homegrown style that I do enjoy. 70 minutes is a bit much though, and if you cut this thing down, I think that you could have a great album here. I think Oberst's unique vocals matched with the already strong vocals are a great selling point here. I love the closing three tracks. On the whole, though, it's a strong debut filled with some good songs that just simply runs a bit long for its liking. 3.5 stars, and that's kind of what I would say about a lot of Bright Eyes records as a whole. I feel like if they were pared down a little bit, gotten to like that 35 to 45 minute range as opposed to being like 55 to 65, I feel like a lot of their records could really do with just trimming a bit of the fat, and they would be even better for me. But up from there, my final record at 3.5 stars, I have the record from 2020, Down in the Weeds. This was a really good comeback. Ugh. This was a really good comeback for the band, and I have a strong 3.5 stars for this one. They're still playing with a bit more of the Baroque and chamber pop influences that they've been working with for a while, matched with the indie rock sound they've been using since Cassadaga at this point, and it's just a very strong crop of songs. Dance and Sing, Mariana Trench, Stairwell Song, and To Death's Heart are all very strong. Despite some rockiness near the front of the record, it generally plays as a really strong, enjoyable indie rock record. Just all good stuff. 3.5 stars. And then my top four, they're all going to be 4 stars, all records that I really enjoy and could listen to, not get bored of them. Number four for me, I'm going with their sophomore release, though, Letting Off the Happiness. Everything positive I said about the debut can be applied here. Just a better, tighter package, being only around 10 tracks. They're all pretty good. Oberst is showing himself to become a better lyricist, and his vocals are generally getting a bit more robust and refined across this record. The band has some more standout moments too, with some really cool drum parts on here. I love the acoustic work as well. The production is notably a bit cleaner while still having some grit to not fully clean up the band. All in all, it's a noticeable improvement filled with strong songs. It's 4 stars, really good. Then I'm going with Lifted or The Story is in the Soil. Keep your ear to the ground. Their album titles are so obnoxious sometimes. This is a really good album, really hurt by the length. 70 minutes is just a tad much for me in regards to this group. I wish it were trimmed down. Maybe the best 50 minutes to an hour could be acceptable, but really I'd love like a 45-minute record because that's just a sweet spot for me. As it stands, some moments drag on. On the whole, however, though it's an evolution of the group's sound, the band tightens up with some of their finest arrangements up to this point. Oberst continues to grow as both a vocalist and a lyricist, and it's filled with just great songs on here. On the whole, it's just incredibly well crafted. Best songs were Method Acting, False Advertising, Lover I Don't Have to Love, and Ways to Paint. Really, all the major issues with this record boil down to length. It's a really good album, 4 stars. Now, number two, I'm going with most people's number one. I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning. Another album. This is going to be the thing for my top two Bright Eyes records. These are the ones that I didn't really get as much whenever I was first listening to the band. Whenever I first heard I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning, I think I gave it 3 stars. Same with what my number one's going to be. They're both up to 4 stars now with re-listens. Yeah, but this one is just another evolution upon Lifted. The songwriting gets tighter, and this album you have some amazing backing vocals from Emmylou Harris. She complements this album really beautifully well. Her and Ober's voices just pair with each other love beautifully. And all in all, though, it's just a really great set of songs. The band performing at a peak level. I do think that there are one or two weaker moments, but an album with songs such as We Are Nowhere and It's Now, Lua, Poison Oak, and Road to Joy has to be at least 4 stars. It's really good stuff. But my number one album is going to be the 2000, I believe, 7 release, Cassadaga. Not quite sure how people really feel about this one. Comes off of their two classics, so. But on first listen, I'm not really all that crazy about it. 3 stars is where I had it. Although I kind of knew after I heard it, this as well as other records would probably be a grower. And it did, because I re-listened to this one because from Michelle and I mentioned a lot, Tastes Like Music. Jason actually said this is his favorite Bright Eyes record. So I was like, okay, and I heard some other people that I know like this album, so okay, I'll give it another shot. It really grew on me. The record skyrocketed from what was my ninth favorite to my favorite record by them. Very much flavored in alt country, and in many ways described as their most mature, I would say. A lot of the more whiny and sort of emo qualities in Ober's lyrics and vocals are gone. They're created for some more well-controlled, more naturally sung tunes, more than the arrangements sound. Yeah, the arrangements sounding great, and him also really blending into them brilliantly. The center from Four Winds to I Must Belong Somewhere is a breezy, lovely listen. The bookends are what drop it to a 4. I don't love the opener nor the closer, but I still do think it's a really strong release. It is a 4-star album, a really good record, Cassadaga. And that's kind of how I feel about Bright Eyes as a whole. I just think that they're a pretty solid, pretty fun band. I struggle to really get super in love with any of their records, but I still do enjoy most of them. I had everything but one at least a good score, so I do respect them, and I want to like Connor Oberst more than I generally do. But even still, it's a really solid group. Like a lot of their songs, and would highly recommend a good majority of their records. That being said, I really hope that you enjoyed this, and you have a great one. Bye.